there's quite a few studies coming out of Germany that are really doing like experimental and field work around, diverse work groups and how they can perform well together. And managed well, the age diverse teams, younger and older, tend to be the most productive. We don't have to think too much about that, because we know that if they cooperated, we would take all this like all-wheel drive, like experiential thinking and deep foundation of knowledge, and add that to their new ideas and enthusiasm and everything else that young people bring. And that's a superpower right there. And so if we can overcome these sort of like age stereotypes and barriers, then imagine what we can do both in the workplace and just, in our society. So there's a little bit of that going on in Europe, because you can imagine in Germany, they've got these fantastic like automobile companies that really have a wealth of like engineers that are like been there 20, 30 years. And they're trying to get that to be like corporate knowledge to pass that on, but also for the younger and older people to really, work together because of the aging population as well, right? So it serves many purposes. But, in age diversity, I think is a really important thing. And so as I mentioned in my non-academic work, I also am part of the Modern Elder Academy. And the Modern Elder Academy is like a group that's come out in Australia. It's someone who is a colleague of mine. She travelled over to the US and went to this world's first Modern Elder Academy, and then she's brought it out here to the Blue Mountains. And they sort of are running workshops on, age diversity and transformation, and sort of encouraging us as a whole to really embrace our, positive aging, and to move from the mindset of the learn, earn and retire to this sort of more multi-stage life where we might change careers and mentor, like a mutual mentoring, relationship with someone younger. And that sort of is a way to sort of like regenerate the next stage of your life and career and all that sort of thing. So there's just all this like really different dynamic things that we can approach this aging journey. It's just that we have been socialized to think that there's this sort of like learn in school, earn, and then retire when we get to like 50 or 60, but we're living till 80. So that doesn't make sense anymore.
One of the things that I know as previous studies have shown, particularly in terms of cultural diversity, but it also applies to age and gender diversity, particularly in the business I'm in, which is acting. Scripts will be very specific in terms of the characters. They'll have character descriptions. They'll give an age range. They'll be very specific about that, except when it gets to generic characters like a doctor or a lawyer or the taxi driver. The moment casting agents see doctor, they think young, male, Anglo.
Dark hair, no grey hair.
and that's always puzzled me, why that is the default position and I've never known what you need to do to change that. If it's just a doctor, why wouldn't it be a woman? Why is the assumption that it will be a man?
Yeah. I mean, I asked the same question. I can't remember her name, but I'll have to tell you later. But she did a great TED talk about she was on a flight and she heard the pilot's voice come over, and it was a female, right? And so as a woman, she was like, "Oh yeah, girl power, she's a female pilot." And then she said, for a second, when it got bumpy, she was like, "I hope she knows how to drive." And she was thinking, why did I think that? Like, I would never think that for a second if it were a male pilot. And so, it's good that we can self-reflect and go, why do we think that way? And I think I would encourage us to, more and more to think that way about stereotypes, because, then you can be empowered and own that instead of it owning you,
I'm very fascinated by the fact that you've done some work with ageing prisoners. Are all the things we've spoken about, do they occur, and are they any different in that world?
Yeah, I sort of became interested in that when I was completing my, thesis on culture, but then I realised, when I saw this great program on BBC about the aging prisoner population, that, they're a particularly vulnerable group, and the prison system's actually been caught off guard in terms of its capacity to manage the level coming in to the, and I would say that, ageism affects all of us, but especially vulnerable groups, because, with ageism comes an undervaluing, and we know in Australia, even just from the sheer fact that we've had this Royal Commission into, aged care and the many, many issues with the aged care, that aging is an afterthought because of our attitudes. So if we can become more conscious about our attitudes, and we're all aging, and, I sort of say to young people, because I give a lecture on my research around the aging prisoner population, and what I try to say to the students is like, we're all aging. It's not we live our life and then bump into this thing called age at 60 or 70. We're aging from the beginning, and it's a life course thing. And you guys will probably live the longest at the moment. So, you guys probably want to start getting interested in aging well. And when I say
we are
aging
interested, well, Natasha, we're very interested.
Yeah.